doing a fourth movie?
Yeah, it's great. And
Does it change your perspective? Is it different going in, or?
well, it's always different.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least friendly neighborhood V Infuso. And since the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, it's got a lot of webheads thinking, what if? There's been a call to action by Spider-Man fans worldwide to make an Amazing Spider-Man 3 or a Spider-Man 4. Hell, come to think of it, when the Amazing Spider-Man series first came out, there was still a lot of desperate interest in seeing Sam Raimi's vision for these characters one more time. One more big adventure in the world that so many people fell in love with.
They love me.
They wanted Spider-Man 4 then, and they want Spider-Man 4 now. But what if I told you that Spider-Man 4 already happened? Kinda. Sort of. A little bit. Would you believe that a follow-up to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy already sort of exists? Probably not, right? Like, you would have known about it if it did. But it does. Kinda.
And it's real! Don't you understand? It is real!
Which is why today, I will be talking to y'all about SpiderMan Friend or Foe. This was a game meant to follow the events of the original Spidey trilogy. Not necessarily the games that are accompanying those films, because those things don't even follow their own continuity most of the time. We'll get into that later in a different video. And look, I get you being skeptical about all this, but if you think I'm lying to you, just take one look at the game's cover art.
It looks very, similar.
Okay.
These aren't just any versions of these characters. These are specifically the ones from those films. Just look at their designs. This was very clearly made to cash in on the ridiculous success of the first 3 Spider-Man movies. With this game coming out in 2007, the same year the last of that series came out. And just for comparison's purpose, this is what all these characters look like in those movies, in this game, and in the comics. Yeah. Now, everywhere I've read about this game states that it wasn't made to follow the canon of the films, and it is only loosely inspired by them. But I'm calling bullshit. These designs weren't inspired by the Sam Raimi designs. They're literally taken Sam Raimi designs. There are next to no changes made on any of these character models. On top of that, if it was only inspired by those movies, and not an attempt to cash in and continue the original events, you want to explain to me how Harry's new Goblin shows up here? Because that character doesn't exist in anything else. I mean, Harry does become the Green Goblin in multiple continuities, but he never becomes the new Goblin, and he never comes anywhere near close to looking like that. I mean, granted, Harry should be dead, as should his Goblin father Norman, and also Doc Ock, and Venom. Sandman even became Dust in the Wind. Wow, Spider-Man really just took them all out, didn't he? I guess Tobey's Spider-Man was taught off screen by the Punisher, which explains that cameo at the end of the film. You kill them once, and you won't ever have to worry about them coming back to kill your loved ones. And I hope you're taking notes, Andy.
Gwen!
If you still weren't sure that this is in fact desperately trying to tie itself into everyone's favorite franchise, then the opening cutscene will make sure that you are. Having Spidey face off against his greatest threats from those movies, sans Mr. Dickovich, of course.
Give me rent.
And it was in this scene that I realized that these characters don't just look like the characters from the movies. They sound like the characters from the movies too. At least some of them do. Others, not so much. That's one of the most confusing things about this game. Some of these characters are ripped straight out of the movies that they're clearly trying to rip them out of, or rip them off of, depending on which way you want to look at it. But others feel like a strange amalgamation of their comic selves and their big screen counterpart. Like, here's Doc Ock trying to put his machine from the movie back together, but he's out here speaking with a foreign accent that's foreign to his accent on the big screen.
Spider-Man!
Something talking.
And then you got Flint Marko, who sounds exactly like the bad guy from George of the Jungle.
Got any clever little quips for me, webhead?
I don't want to hurt you. Leave now.
And the Green Goblin sounds like someone trying real hard to sound like the Green Goblin. You're not doing a good job, but I appreciate the effort nonetheless.
I I will destroy you! Now that you've really pissed me off.
I'm gonna give you a solid B+.
And you're lucky to get that.
It's in that very moment that the heroes and the villains are attacked by what I can only describe as Venom's extended family. Spider-Man is saved in the nick of time, no pun intended, you'll see where I'm going with that in a second, by a flying saucer piloted by none other than Nick Fury. Now you see what I did there? And Nick Fury is looking a bit different. Look, I wasn't expecting Samuel L. Jackson, but you could have at the very least given me David Hasselhoff. He goes on to explain that the same meteor that brought Venom to Earth is responsible for these symbiote hybrids, known as Phantoms. He also explains that the meteor broke apart in the atmosphere, landing in 5 different parts of the world, and one of those shards is being used to make all these Phantoms. Somehow. The game is simple enough. You go from location to location, meeting new heroes and villains along the way, while also reacquainting yourself with older villains from the movies, and occasionally having the game insist that Spider-Man has met other heroes and villains that he clearly hasn't. Because fuck it, I guess. The main villains fall under the control of some nefarious evildoer using an amulet. So naturally, you go through the game and you have to beat them back into reality. And once they're finally conscious of their bad decisions, these foes become friends. Hence the title. But actually, more accurately, they just become your sidekick for select missions. And it still feels like there's not a lot of love lost, at least according to the dialogue. Really, you're just playing out every bad buddy cop movie you saw growing up. These two don't like each other, but they're gonna have to learn to work together to get to the end credits.
Sorry, can't help. I've got enough psychopath sidekicks as it is.
Oh, come on.
Alright, come on.
You also team up with a plethora of heroes, including the Black Cat, Iron Fist, and Blade. Blade, by the way, who is looking a lot less Wesley Snipes and a lot more sticky fingers. It makes for interesting enough gameplay, but it's not amazing. Actually, it kinda just feels like a much more shitty version of Ultimate Alliance. The story is only loosely attached to get you from mission to mission. It doesn't feel like it's integrated in all that well. As a matter of fact, the story itself feels like it was tacked on last minute altogether. And the end reveal is quite possibly one of the most obvious reveals in any Spider-Man game I've ever seen. The end reveal, of course, being that it is Mysterio behind all of this. And considering the amulet, the fact that the Phantoms are in part holograms, and Venom says the one controlling everything has a bubble for a head, yeah, that was pretty obvious. At the end of the game, Spidey decides he needs to once again embrace the symbiote. In the final part of the game, we're playing as Black Suit Spidey, but there's significantly less dancing, so it's significantly less fun. But hey, props to them for including this. Eventually, and inevitably, Mysterio goes down, and the shards of meteor are given back to Nick Fury. And this game has the balls to try to set up a sequel by having Nick Fury claim that he wants to figure out how to properly utilize these meteor parts, telling the computer to dub it Project Carnage. Wow, that is a great setup that will go absolutely nowhere because nobody liked this game and nobody would play the sequel. But here's my question in all of this. Why would you tie this into the movies? This is so fundamentally different in tone, approach, and even style. You use the likeness of all those characters, but you don't really do a whole lot with them. And you're setting up and establishing a much larger world outside of the main cast from the movies. Why give them these looks? Why promote this as having something to do with those movies? I don't know, it feels like somewhere along the line wires got crossed. Like, there were 2 teams and they were working on 2 separate Spider-Man games, but they somehow accidentally merged. One was a more cartoon PG, super kid-friendly team-up, beat-em-up game, and the other was a 4th installment into the Spider-Man movie games. I think individually these 2 ideas probably would have worked out fine, but when put together, they just made for a total fucking disaster. The game was clearly made to cash in on the success of the Spider-Man movies, despite having almost exactly nothing to do with those movies. It feels like a smart, but shitty marketing scheme. Like, I'm sure it worked. Like, I'm sure people bought the game. It's just, they probably didn't enjoy themselves after they got to play it. This feels like the video game equivalent of clickbait. Honestly, this still doesn't feel real for me. And I know that it is. I've just gone over all of it. This whole game feels like some bizarre fever dream that I'd get after getting bitten by a radioactive spider.
And it's real! It's real! Oh, God!
This game, it just shouldn't exist. It feels like a really cheap money grab, and it plays like one too. While it's far from the worst Spider-Man game ever made, I would say it's even farther away from the best. It had a really interesting premise, but it just never delivered on it. This game, like the last movie in the trilogy, is a complete disappointment. And with all that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.